rivalry. She'll be here as well. She's got some resources as well as we can send this presentation afterwards so you guys have it as well as her information. So definitely if you have questions, NCAA, great resource to have. Up next, we have a speaker from the Jordan McNair Foundation. So that name may sound very familiar. Unfortunately, in 2018, Jordan was affected by a heat stroke that ultimately took his life too soon. He was a member of the University of Maryland football team, and unfortunately, we've had those instances happen here in Georgia as well. What was a tragic situation, his parents have now started a foundation in his honor to live on his legacy and teach about the dangers of what can happen if you fall into this predicament. If unfortunately something does happen, what an emergency action plan can do for you and your team. So I'm going to bring up his father, Marty McNair. I'll give it up for him.
So this is interesting, just to get this from a Penn State person. Penn State is our arch rival. So good morning, everybody. I'm Marty McNair from the Jordan McNair Foundation. And it's interesting because as Ivory was just talking, I can remember when the coaches were at our table a few days prior to signing day. Coaches from the University of Maryland were at our table. As a father, I asked two questions. Somebody tell me what those two questions were, or at least one of those questions. How many of us are parents in the room? Student athletes. All right, what's that one question all your parents usually ask? They ask two questions of everybody, all the coaches in the room. Wait, hold up, what was it? No, somebody else. I asked, can Jordan get some playing time? And I asked, did they have any type of support around mental health and substance abuse? Just because I owned a mental health and substance abuse facility in the actual Baltimore City at that time. I didn't think to ask anything else in the event of, I didn't have an in the event of mindset. So 6 years ago, this time, June the 4th, 6 years ago, I was walking down this very long hallway in the University of Maryland shock trauma unit. So whenever I would walk in the hospital, Jordan had a heat stroke, and basically, literally, he had just had a liver transplant, right? Because the conversation that we had previous Friday was, if we don't make a decision right now, Mom and Dad, Jordan will be dead within 12 hours. 85% of his liver is in necrosis, and you all need to make a decision right now. So we had a successful liver transplant, so I thought. So every time I would walk down this long hallway, which was literally the equivalent, it seemed like, of 3 football fields, I kept telling myself, Jordan's going to get better. He may not play football again, but he's definitely going to get better. And at this particular time, I had no idea of what a heat stroke was. I'm using heat stroke loosely. Basically, I didn't know anything about a heat-related injury. I thought heat stroke meant if you got in the sun, you got overheated, you got in the shade, you drank some water, all would be right with the world. I had no idea that my son would be fighting for his life with 85% of his liver, or just got recently, a few days ago, 6 years ago, he would just get a liver transplant. So here we are 6 years later. Unfortunately, Jordan passed on June the 13th of 2018, and basically, I had 2 ways to go. And as a father, I'll tell everybody in the room, unfortunately, I hope nobody's experienced this, but no matter what the situation was, you always feel it's your fault. I could have did something better. What did I miss? What questions didn't I ask? I thought I prepared him for everything in his life, but unfortunately, I missed the questions, and I started looking back at all of these things. And when I would have these long walks from the hospital entrance to the ICU or the shock trauma or the ICU elevator, I would ask myself all these questions. Then I started to think about, if I don't know these things about this type of injury, how many other parents in America don't know these things? All I know was Jordan was 6'5", he was 300 pounds. As Ivory just said, he started getting offers in the 9th grade as a freshman. We had options out of the Yang, which we could have went to. We chose Maryland. However, now when I started to think about all of the times that we would go to all types of combines, clinics, Under Armour, Nike, Army All-American, all I ever did was sit in the stands. If a piece of safety equipment had fell out of the sky and hit me in the head, I would have known what none of it was. So the reason that we even came up with X's and O's and player safety was, anybody been to a Glazier football clinic? Got it, it's few people. And I kept saying, we were going to Glazier, selling a product that we manufacture, a safety product, and I kept saying, all they keep talking about is X's and O's. I never hear anybody talk about player safety, right? So somebody on my team came up with the great idea to say, you know what, why don't we just start doing X's and O's of player safety? And also what I'll do, I'll have Danielle share this presentation with you all as well, and I'll be around all day if you got any additional questions. But one of the things that I realized about student athletes and coaches and athletic trainers and all these different types of things is, one of the things that we emphasize is culture eats strategy for breakfast. So basically, before you can talk about wins and losses, nowadays we got to create a culture of safety. We got to create a culture of care, because kids nowadays, our student athletes, they got way more resources than we did when we were kids. See, I'm 55, so Google for me back then was, I was the only child I was spoiled was encyclopedias, right? So of course, and that was, just think how antiquated that was, but that was real time. Where now, as me and Coach Mike were just talking, you literally have 10 to 20 different resources on social media that they can look at prior to coming to practice every day, and guess what? They all think they know more than us. Right? They all think that all these people on social media are real and all these types of things, and they think they know more than you, Coach. So what we like to do, we try to emphasize is that if you create a culture of caring, right? You're listening to a kid. You know, that old school mentality of the way that some of us probably were coached probably just don't work no more. You got to create a belief system now. And when you create a belief system that kids believe in what you're doing, you believe in me, you care about me, the likelihood of you having a successful season will probably be a lot better as opposed to not. Wait, I'm sorry, I'm pushing it back. My bad. Thank you, Danielle. All right, so one of the things, let me ask you this, show of hands. Any medical professionals in the room? That's what I do. Because see, the interesting thing about when a kid goes down, or God forbid a kid gets injured, parents always think it's going to be you that's going to save their child. Show of hands, how many of you all got athletic trainers? Half the room. There are 21,000 high schools across the nation, and the very small percentage of them have athletic trainers, meaning they have resources. See, a lot of times, certain schools I've gone to in different states, they may have the school security guard doubling down as the football coach. Right? They may not have a football coach. I was in Gwinnett County yesterday at Shiloh High School. I had never seen a high school with a football program like that. Like, I thought I was at a college campus. I've seen some college campuses that may have been D1, D2, D3 that didn't have all of the resources that they had. So it just varies depending on where you are. So one of the things that we need to be educated on is an emergency action plan. And regardless if you followed our story in the media, and regardless of what you may have heard, it was a toxic culture in Maryland at that time. Yeah, it was, but then they were doing this, and they were fat, and all these negatives around Maryland's program. However, the one thing that was really in play that day was they never followed the emergency action plan. See, a lot of people blame coach, and don't get me wrong, I have a certain feeling about the coach that was there at that time, but really who dropped the ball was the athletic trainer. They're the medical professionals on the field. But what if you don't have a medical professional or an athletic trainer at your school? So again, we just need to be educated all the way around the board. So, show of hands, we all know what an emergency action plan is, correct? Got it. So what I usually tell people is, if you've been in a fire drill before, you know what an emergency action plan is. The potential for a fire can happen every day you walk out on the field. It can happen literally with the snap of a finger. All right, so most of the time what we try to do is, and even if you have one athletic trainer, one of the things that we emphasize is emergency action plan assignments. Who's going to do what in the event of? And the interesting thing is we have to have an in the event of mindset. There's nothing wrong with always thinking something's going to happen, because more than likely something is going to happen, and the more prepared you are, the safer the kids will be. So to go from everything to who's going to call 911, right? And most of the time at the high school level, more than likely you got an EAP, so therefore you already know what numbers to call, what coaches to call, what systems or what venues or entrances to let the emergency medical professionals in, all these types of things. All right, back up here just a tad bit. So the way we broke this down, and I'm just trying to utilize my time here, but the way we broke this down is to a good offense, good defense, snap, just a lot of football terminology in regards to this. But the main thing is, when you look at a EAP, it's like an all-pro left tackle. It works best when you get a lot of snaps. I don't know, in the state of Georgia, one of the last bills that we've gotten passed in the state of Maryland is called House Bill 836. And I worked on this, actually I brought this bill to the state, and then we got it passed. However, but one of the main things that we focus on with 836 is, we focused that, or it's mandated, because when you look at legislation, verbiage is very, very crucial. One word could change the whole bill. But it's mandated that the emergency action plan is not only, is practiced twice a year, before every spring season and before every fall season. So basically this means we walk through this on a consistent basis, right? So therefore all your safety equipment should be within 2 to 3 minutes reach, meaning if you got an AED machine, if you got a cold water tub. So basically everybody should know CPR, all the different things in the event that something can happen. These are the things that, this is mandated by the law. I don't know if it's in Georgia yet, however, but these are the things that if you're not practicing, practice your EAP consistently. The faces of heat stroke, and unfortunately, our faces here, this is really what it looks like. You got Jordan McNair. Obviously, it should be in reverse because anybody heard of Corey Stringer? Right, Corey Stringer was the first NFL player that had a heat-related injury or died from, or passed away from complications of a heat stroke. And let me back up really, really quick. Anybody know what a heat stroke is? All right, good answer. So basically, when your core body temperature reaches above 104 degrees, that's the equivalent of your body being in the microwave oven, right? So you literally have a 20 to 30 minute window to cool that core body temperature down before damage becomes irreparable. Can anybody be subject to a heat-related injury? All day long. Any of us, any athlete that don't have, if you're outside and you're doing any type of overexertion or exertion, you can potentially have a heat-related injury. The main thing is this, heat-related injuries aren't bad, however, when they're mismanaged, that's when they become tragic. So again, they start at heat exhaustion, cramps, nausea, vomiting, things like that, lightheadedness. Then when it escalates into heat stroke, that's the equivalent of that core body temperature steady heating up. Usually happens with your bigger guys, your linemen, right? They're not hydrated properly, and I could just go down a list of things, right? Or we're not acclimating, we're doing too much too quick. That day that Jordan went down, they were doing gases the very first day of practice. Now, even though I know this is a college football thing, or a football thing, why is a lineman running up and down the field 10 times? It makes no sense. It don't even make sense in the snaps. So be very mindful to do position-specific drills when it comes to that. Even if they run at half field, 20, 30 yards, that's more appropriate than having a wide out or a special teams person running the whole length of the field. So please make note of that. So Corey Stringer went down about 21 years ago, and unfortunately we haven't seen any more of those type of incidents at that professional level. However, in Jordan's case, I didn't know anything at that particular time about statistics. Jordan was the 31st player that went down since 2018 in the NCAA. He fell along predictable statistics. It was going to be 2 to 3 linemen that went down. It was 2 that went down, Jordan and another guy. Another kid, Brayton Bradford, he was at a school in Kansas, right? Predictable statistics. Until somebody made some noise, luckily our case got to, or our story got to a national platform, and unfortunately, I didn't want it. I thought he would have played at a high level. I didn't think he'd be the poster boy for student athlete safety across the nation. But let me back up to that 20 to 30 minute window to cool a kid down or cool a student athlete down. Ice, water, cold water tubs. That's the easiest way, the quickest way to cool somebody down. They got Jordan to the ER an hour and 45 minutes later with a core body temperature of 106 degrees, and therefore you already see we went from a healthy kid Tuesday morning to an emergency liver transplant with 85% of his liver being in the process. He cooked right there on the field while they were trying to figure out what was going on. Some of the other kids that you died as a result of heat-related injuries. You got Zach Martin Posenberg, he died the year before Jordan. You got Remy Hidalgo, Zach was in Florida, Remy was in Louisiana. Hunter Midkiff, he was in Arkansas. And a lot of times these types of things happen when people aren't prepared. Now, I'm sure we all saw Damar Hamlin, right? That's a well-practiced emergency action plan. But again, this is the NFL. They got resources. They probably got 30 doctors at that level waiting on something to happen. A lot of times that's not our case. So what do we have to do? We need to practice within our programs to say, okay, who's going to do what in the event of. So let's always be mindful of that. Most traumatic injuries usually happen around the same times doing the same things. This is that time of year. A lot of times, when Jordan went down, it was May 29th of 2018, we're in this season. They don't have to be hot days. They don't have to be real warm days. If they're humid days, these types of things can happen. So be mindful when it comes to acclimating your kids, or bottom line, just don't do too much too quick. You know, I know I always ask this question about punishment drills. I know we run them, but a lot of times don't run them after they practice. If you got an athletic trainer, make sure your AT is there to cover your butt, just in the event of. So everybody, if nothing else, just take an in the event of mindset with you today. Because the last thing we really want is for a kid to go down on our watch and we're not prepared. Unfortunately, you know, the interesting thing, I use a shock value of one of our slides that we removed just out of respect. But this was in regards to the young lady, Amani Bell, who passed in 2019 from coaches making a poor decision by just saying, hey, we're gonna keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing. And at the end of the day, lives change all the way around the board. Everybody's life in that situation changed, unfortunately. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, so like I said, everybody get access to the slide. Heat exhaustion versus heat stroke. In the event that a student athlete has heat exhaustion, yeah, move them to a shaded area. Get them some cold water. Get them to some ice or air conditioning area. Move any extra equipment and clothing. Cool water, cold towels, and cold water tub. Have the athlete lie comfortable with legs above heart level. If the athlete is vomiting or nauseated, have them drink a chilled sports drink, and the athlete's condition should improve rapidly. Always remember, cool first, transport second. Regardless of what you hear, you call 911, you better put that student athlete in some ice first. Cool first, transport second. It's kind of like those of us that remember, what do you do when you have a fire? What do we do? Somebody tell me. Stop, drop, and roll. Right. So I'm not the only one my age in here. Thank you. But again, this is in our mindset. Cool first, transport second. So if you can remember that, any type of heat stuff, cool first, transport second. Then call 911. All right. As the saying goes, the best offense is a good defense. In terms of player safety, knowledge is your best defense. Knowing the signs, symptoms, of treatments, and treatment modalities for injuries will prepare you when they happen. All right, cool. We talked about the signs. Everybody knows what to do. Make sure you got somebody that has your safety equipment there. I mean, keep the keys to the facilities, guys, because I'm going to tell you, this can happen so quick. So always just be prepared for when something does happen. All right, so our takeaways today would be, I can't emphasize enough, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Create a safe place for your student athletes. Give your student athletes a voice of self-advocacy. Guess what? Some things we ain't gonna listen to everything they say, but you gotta give them an opportunity to at least say what's on their mind. And we gotta be emphatic towards that. Are they gonna get their way all the time? No, they're not. However, but you have to create that safe space, or it's a suggestion to keep that safe space going. Remember, players today are much smarter, educated, and opinionated. Listen to hear your athletes, don't squash their voice. Culture is built on giving student athletes a voice. As I've just said, they may not get their way, but partnership is a key to success. Nowadays, you already heard Ivy just speak, and literally kids are it's a whole different day nowadays. You know, now she talked about at the collegiate level, but a lot of you all are dealing with kids going there. Now you got NIL deals and all these types of things, and it really just makes our lives that much more challenging in a sense, because not only are you dealing with the kids, but really you're dealing with the family. And the family probably needs that money. What 19 to 20-year-old need $1 million contract? Not many. Because you can't buy that many pairs of sneakers or whatever the case, or Jordans or whatever they wear. However, but this is the process, or this is the world that we're living in right now. And the more educated that we all are, the safer all our kids will be. And last but not, I just said that, right? Healthy student athletes who are healthy mentally, emotionally, and physically win games. And I can't emphasize enough, the more educated that we all are about player safety, the safer all of our kids will be. Hey, I'll be around all day. I got some information on the foundation. Please, I'm sure if you got any questions, don't hesitate to come up and ask. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Marty. One more time for Marty, everything he's done. Our next speaker gave us the clicker and it's not working, so I'm gonna let you deal with that. So our next